First, you'll need material for book covers. For the sake of this demo, I'm using 2 pieces of canvas board, like what you would paint on, but you can use other things like coasters, old book covers, in the backs of sketchbooks, or this is actually the back of a picture frame, I think. I don't know. Anyway, whatever material that you like that will hold up. To keep this demo a little bit shorter, I'm going to start with these pre-covered canvas boards, but use what you like. You'll also need paper. Any paper that you like that will hold up to being folded will work just fine. And a ruler. A metal ruler is really useful because that straight edge is sharper usually than plastic, and you can tear paper against it. A cutting mat is optional but extremely helpful. Scrap paper and a pencil. I'm using a mechanical pencil because I'm after that very precise point. A bone folder, optional but also helpful. And needles, curved or straight. Both work, but I found the curved needle is so much easier for linking and looping your threads. You'll also need a sharp object to poke holes with. I prefer an awl, but you also can use push pins, a needle, whatever is sharp that can poke holes. And you'll want a surface that you can poke holes onto, like cardboard, or this is just a scrap of corkboard. That works too. Really, you can use anything that will hold up to sewing and won't fall apart or get loose long term. These are the threads that I found that work well for me. Feel free to experiment and try your own. The synthetic thread that you sew leather with works really great for bookbinding, and it comes in a variety of different colors, and it's relatively inexpensive. Linen thread, you can get this pre-waxed, and usually it comes in more natural colors. And then another thread you can try is hemp, if you like to try hemp. So it also can come in a variety of colors. It's really a personal preference thing. Today I'm using the waxed polyester leather working thread just because I really wanted to use blue. And you'll want some beeswax. So the point of the beeswax is to make the thread more grippy, but if you have thread that's already pre-waxed, you may not even want it. And they originally look like the one on the left, and then they end up looking like this little nugget on the right-hand side after I use it a while. Optional, but not required, is a beanbag or other soft or smooth weight. The very first thing after you have your materials is to decide what orientation you want your book. Do you want it more portrait orientation, or do you want it more landscape? That's the most important because that will determine how we tear down our pages. It's very helpful to take a scrap piece of paper and draw a diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and do arrows so I can stay on track, because once you get everything out, it's really easy to lose where you're at. Double check that your ruler measurement starts at the very end or slightly in. So mine starts like 1/8 of an inch in. So when you're lining up your ruler, make sure you're lining it up on the 0 line. That way your measurements are all the same. To do this, I just take my ruler, line up the 0 line with the edge of that first cover, and then find where the second cover ends. And I mark it on my scrap paper. And then I measure how tall the book is. So I'm lining up my ruler on the 0 edge, and I'm going to write this measurement down. There you go. I'm in the States, and I'm using the imperial system, but if you're on metric, it's the same. The process is exactly the same. It's really 8 1/8 inches. There you go, fixed it. I like to go a little bit under the measurements. That way my paper doesn't hang out the sides. I lay my covers next to each other, and then I take my ruler, line up the 0 edge, and I go about 1/4 of an inch or about 1 centimeter in from the edge of the cover. That gives me a little bit of space, and I write that measurement down on my scrap paper. For the height of the book, I'm not going to take off as much. I'm going to choose to go about 1/8 of an inch in. That's just personal preference because I like less of a gap. Let's be real for a second. If it comes down to making a book or not making a book because your budget is very limited, my suggestion is to go with the way that you get the biggest bang for your buck. So if you take your book covers and you lay them on your paper and that's the way they fit and you're on limited funds, go ahead and tear your paper like that. However, if you want to work with the grain of the paper, which is the traditional way to do, is you can figure it out by taking your paper and bending it. What you're going to feel when you bend your paper is resistance. So when you bend your paper, you can see that it's bending one way a lot easier than the other way. That means that the grain of the paper is working with the fold that you're creating. So normally you would want to tear your paper down to go with the grain of the paper, so your book folds the way it naturally wants to. To begin tearing down your paper, you want your measurements, a ruler, and of course your paper. The Sharpie I'm using to mark my cutting mat is optional. It's just so you can see my marks. A cutting mat is so helpful for this because what you can do is figure out your measurements on your mat, and it makes lining up the ruler a lot faster. But the cutting mat is not necessary. You can mark each paper and tear with the ruler if you want to. If you're using a cutting mat, you do want to mark both sides. The reason is we'll be using that ruler to line that up so we can tear our paper. If you're using a smaller mat like I am, you'll find probably that when you lay your paper down, one of the measurements is probably covered up. Don't start with that measurement then. Start with the other one. Line your paper up on the zero edge, lay your ruler across your measurements. Make sure you spread your fingers of your opposite hand, the hand that is not doing the tearing. Spread them apart and then pull against the edge of the ruler. There's one. And now I need to tear the other one. This appears very slow, but once you get the hang of it, you can tear multiple sheets at the same time. So I lined it up at the zero edge. I'm holding my ruler across from measurement to measurement, and then I'm going to tear. You also can use a knife to cut your paper if you want to. However, I like the little torn edges, so that's what I'm doing. It doesn't really matter what area of the zero line that you line your paper up, as long as it's squared off with a vertical line and a horizontal line. Take your ruler and line it up on the marks that you created, and then tear your paper. And there you go. You have a set of book pages. Check the size of your pages by taking a paper and folding it in half and then placing it in your covers. See if you like it. If you do, you're good to go. To speed up the process, you can do more than one piece of paper at a time. I like to do about 3 or 4 pieces. Kind of depends on the thickness of the paper that you're using. Make sure your papers are even, so you don't want to have any kind of misshapen papers when you're trying to do several at once. It makes it very challenging. You'll line them up and then tear them just like before. So place them on the zero line, take your ruler, lay it against the measurement, and then tear. Because you're using multiple sheets, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to tear, so go slow and line it up on your measurements just like you did before. Okay, so somehow I ended up with some papers that are too wide. Like, how did that happen? It's a very easy fix if you get off on a measurement and your paper is too big. If it's too small, can't really fix that, but if it's too big, it's an easy fix. You'll take your paper that you need to cut down and line it up on your mat. And then depending on how much paper is needing to be cut off, you can either tear it or you can use a knife. Ta-da! There you go. Easy fix. It's time to divide our pages up into signatures. So a signature is just a grouping of pages. Whatever number of papers that you do will double the number of pages in your signature. How to stay on track after you count them out is to alternate how you place them on your table. So I'm alternating placing a stack vertical, and then I place a stack horizontal, and it just keeps you organized. However you want to do it is fine. This is just the way I found to stay the most organized I can, and I'm very messy. Go ahead and just kind of hit them on the table a little bit. It'll kind of straighten up your papers, and you're ready to fold them. You can use your hands or a bone folder. It's kind of up to you. I'm using a bone folder. Any object that has a straight edge that will not tear or mark your paper is great. Take your first group of pages and fold them so that the ends are even. Then take your bone folder or other object or your hand and run it along the fold to create a crease. And I'm going to repeat this for each one. So folding the signature, taking the bone folder and run it down the crease. And then the same thing again. You could fold your pages individually. I found that folding them in a group keeps them all nice and snug up against each other. To check the size of your book, take your signatures and put them in your covers and squeeze it. That's the thickness that your book will be. If it's too thick, go ahead and remove a signature and look at it now. For me personally, I'm going to keep all 8 signatures. And your signatures are done for now. We're not quite ready to sew. To keep your book from loosening up over time, it's best to press your book pages. Not necessary, but highly recommended. To do this, I'm using scrap paper to protect my pages and some heavy books. Taking my signatures and dividing them up in groups so they're even. Taking another scrap paper and laying it on the top. This is the DIY cheap version, which is just to use heavy books. But if you want to indulge in a bookbinding press, that's perfectly okay. You'll need measurements, a ruler, a scrap piece of paper, and your pencils. And you can use your cover again to double check if you like. The easiest way I found to make a template is just to measure your book cover. Mark where the edge of your book cover is, and then designate a top and a bottom on your template. For the first measurements, we're going to go ahead and get the very end stitches. I typically go about 3/8 of an inch in, about 1 centimeter. The reason for this is that if you go too far in, what happens, your book will wiggle more. These outside stitches are what keeps your book from wiggling a lot. So they're really important. For the rest of the marks, we're going to work from the outside in, and you can space them however you want. You can do odd or even number, it doesn't matter. Measure from the outside in on both sides. The reason that you're working your way to the middle, that any excess measurements, they kind of just get eaten up by the middle and nobody will notice. Lining up the zero line of the ruler on that first measurement, I'm marking 3/4 of an inch in. We're going to try this one first. And then I'm going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And I'm going to work my way back and forth between the two measurements and leave a gap in the middle or see if I can make it fit. Don't like that one, so I'm just going to erase it. No big deal. This is the whole point of making a template. This time around, I'm using an inch. Same thing, I'm going to work my way from the outside in. And that one works. I like to go ahead and write the measurements down. It's up to you, but it always helps me. And then you can choose if you have a bigger piece of paper to cut it off or tear it down. It's completely up to you. Didn't happen to tear my paper down first, so now I'm doing that, just tearing it down to fit the size of my template. It's now time to mark the holes on the covers. It's very easy. You're going to take your cover, and my suggestion is to flip it over on the inside, and that way any marks you make will be on the inside. Take your ruler, lay it on the edge of your cover. I like to go about 1/2 of an inch. I wouldn't go less than 1/4 inch or a centimeter. It's kind of up to you. Then take your template, lay it against the marks that you created on your cover, and mark your holes. Don't forget to mark the top of your cover. Now we can poke holes in our covers. You'll need an awl or another sharp tool, something to poke holes into. So I'm not wanting to use my cutting mat, so I'm using cardboard, laying my cover down and poking through. I'm just going to go slightly through, just so much that there is a little bit of a hole poking out on the other side. The reason for this is I don't want to shove the material from the inside and make a mini mountain on the other side of my cover. You can easily do this also by holding it in your hand. Just be real careful of the sharp tool. You're going for just a teeny tiny hole on the outside of your cover, just like that. I'm going to repeat this for each one. The reason I have my finger over the hole is so I can kind of feel the awl. If you don't want to do that, it's completely a-okay. I'm barely poking through. Then I flip my cover over from the outside in. I push all the way through, and it shoves all the material that's anything extra out of the hole into the inside of the book. You see the excess material? That is why I'm wanting to poke from the outside in. The next thing we want to do is go ahead and get the holes on the other cover. Place your covers together and make sure they're super duper even. Then hold them down tight. Take your awl or your other sharp object and poke through the holes of the first cover into the second. The only thing that matters is that you get little marks on your second cover. Then mark the top of your cover. Next, take your awl and poke through the holes on your cover just enough to get the little bitty holes on the other side. Then flip your cover over and poke all the way through from the outside in. This will push any excess material from inside the hole to the inside of the cover. You'll want to make the holes bigger. You'll notice the awl has a tip and it angles and it gets wider as it gets further in. You can poke through into a thicker surface to poke holes on, and that'll also increase the hole size because the awl goes in deeper. Or if you want to, I actually like to hold it in my hand and I place my fingers on either side of the hole and then I push the awl through and I can kind of see it and feel it, how far it's going. Just be real careful if you choose to hold it in your hand. The next step is I take the end of the awl and I push down the little molehills or little mountains on the inside of the cover. Ta-da! We're ready to go. It's time to prep our pages, so go grab your signatures. Remove the weight or the books that you placed over the top, and let's check them out. They should be much more flat than they were before. Isn't that nice? Add your covers and check out the size of your book. If you like it, keep going on. Next, we'll add the holes to our signatures. So you'll need your signatures, a pencil, your template, and a book cover, your measurements, and a ruler. When you line up your signature with your template, you'll realize that your template is a little bigger just because we did our template off our book covers. You can use the template to mark your holes, or my suggestion is to use the book cover itself. When you put your signature on top of the book cover, you'll notice the gap that we had. Remember, we cut them a little bit smaller. Check your measurements and remind yourself of what size gap that you created. I cut mine about 1/8 of an inch smaller, so I'm taking my ruler and on my cover, I'm going to mark half of that measurement at the top and bottom. Line up your signature and place the top and bottom of the signature with the marks you made on the cover, or you can choose to eyeball it. The edge of the signature should line up with the holes on the cover. Go ahead and mark the top of the signature. I usually like to do this with just an arrow. Remember those marks you made on the cover to plan your holes? That'll help you line your signature up. I like to use mechanical pencil on this because the lead is super tiny and I can just slide it right in the hole up against the signature and it marks the signature. So I'm taking the lead of my pencil and going directly into the hole and letting it touch the edge of the signature. And that's it. Before you move on, make sure you have an arrow pointing up at the top of your signature. You also can mark each page in the signature if you like. This will help if your book signatures get turned around or if you're like me and you accidentally drop them. It helps you stay in order. There are many ways to mark the holes on the rest of your signatures. This is just one. Feel free to find the way that works best for you. An easy way to do this is to take a second signature, line it up with the first, go ahead and mark the arrow at the top, and squish it very tight together, and mark the holes on the second signature, using the first signature as a guide. These will be your guide to help you line up a ruler to get a straight line across the rest of your signatures. Take the two signatures that you just marked and place them at the top and bottom of the stack of the other book signatures. So I'm taking my stack of signatures, I'm going to knock them on the table to help even them up, kind of squish them together as best I can. This is easiest done on the table. So I'm taking it, squeezing it, placing it down, making sure everything is nice and tight. Might take you a few tries to do this. Then you're going to grab your ruler, hold it vertical up against the edge of your book pages. You're going to line it up between the marks and draw a line across. Going to switch out this bigger ruler just because it's a little awkward and use this tiny one. I'll repeat this for every pair of marks on my signatures. Besides a ruler, you can also use something else that has a straight edge. You may notice as you squeeze your book together that some of the edges of your pages are uneven just because you might have torn them by hand. That's okay. If it bothers you, you can go back and fix it. Before you move on, mark an arrow at the top of each of your signatures. This will help you so much as you go to sew. To add your holes to your signatures, you'll definitely need an awl or something else sharp to poke holes with, and a surface that you can poke holes on in your signatures. I like to add them from the outside in, and that way any excess material is pushed onto the inside of the signature. You can choose also to mark your signatures on the inside and add the holes from the inside out. It really is up to you. We are going to be placing our holes directly along the crease. If you have a hole that is slightly off the middle of the crease, most people won't even notice. To help keep my book pages very straight and in line as I go to lay my signature down, when I open up the signature to place it face down, I'll take my finger and put it in the valley at the very top and bottom and squeeze it and then place it down. That keeps all the creases, the little valleys, all together. There is more than one way to hold an awl, so find the way that works best for you. If you hold it with your fist, there really isn't a lot of control. You can also hold it like this. My favorite way to hold my awl is to place my fingers in a manner that help guide and push it down. My thumb and my middle finger at the base, and then my ring and my pinky help guide it, while my index finger pushes down on the top. Placing the tip on the hole and then pushing it down. This helps me guide it. My pinky and my ring finger help keep it on point. My middle finger and my thumb hold it, and then my top finger, my index finger, pushes down, but I can use the rest of my hand too. If you struggle with flexibility or arthritis, you might have to experiment a little bit to find a way that's comfortable to use the awl. You'll get it, just a little practice. You'll repeat this same step for each of your signatures. Just remember, if you're struggling with having your signatures together, that you can pinch the top and the bottom of the valleys as you press it down. Hold it tight and go ahead and poke your holes. Right here you can see that my pencil line was slightly beside the crease. I went ahead and marked my hole directly on the crease, and it kept everything in line. Repeat the same step for each of the rest of your signatures. When you're done punching the holes in your signatures, you may notice a little bit of extra pencil markings on your pages. Go ahead with an eraser and just knock those off real quick. Before moving on, double check to make sure all the arrows are pointing in the same direction. Next, let's measure our thread. The thread will need to run down the vertical line of each cover and loop it. It'll also need to go down the valley of each signature, that is in the very middle of each signature, because this sewing runs along the spine. We need enough thread for 2 covers plus whatever number of signatures that you have. Grab your thread and place it at one side of the spine of your book and pull it across for counting the first cover, the first signature, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and back cover. Because I'm paranoid about running out of thread, I will pull a few more lengths. Usually this gets me enough thread for my book, plus enough for a bookmark, plus a little bit more extra just in case. Cut your thread. I'm going to snip off that little extra and grab your beeswax. This beeswax has been used a lot, and so there's little bits of thread on it, but that's okay. Take your thread and place it between the beeswax and your thumb. Grab the tip of the thread and pull while keeping a firm hold with the other hand. How you wax your thread is not about how hard you push, but how the friction of pulling the thread through will heat up the wax and melt it to your thread. And I pull my thread through about 3 or 4 times until I'm happy with it. You're going to feel the thread get more waxy and grippy. But what happens if you have a really dark thread or you notice there just is too much wax? An easy fix is to take a shirt or some other fabric that doesn't have a lot of fibers and pull your thread through, just as if you're waxing it, but you're just using the shirt. You'll notice the wax is coming off on the shirt. This is how I remove wax when I get too much or the thread is super dark and the wax is showing up too much. It's time to pick out a needle. I love these curved needles because it makes it very easy to link your stitches. But remember, you can use a straight needle as well. When picking out a needle, consider how far apart your spacings of the holes are. You'll want one that is big enough that you can easily maneuver it, but not so big that it makes it challenging to get it between the spaces between your holes. If you're struggling to get the tip of your thread through the eye of the needle, you can snip off the edge of the thread. You can also take your beeswax and re-wax the tip of your thread, and that will help it go through the eye of the needle a little bit easier. Go ahead and pull about 3 or 4 inches more thread through your needle, but do not tie a knot. If you tie a knot at this part, it will not go through the holes. However, you will probably want to go ahead and tie a knot at the other end of your thread. You do not have to do this yet. You can tie it off as you sew the book, but most people I've taught have found this much easier. You can see how thick my knot is. What you can do is smash it with your fingers, and then it flattens it out, and that way it can lay between the pages a little bit easier. It's up to you which direction that you want to sew and whether you want to start from the front cover or the back cover. I typically start from the front cover, so the excess thread and tail ends up at the rear. That way I can make a bookmark that comes from the back. There's really not a wrong way. So I'm going to show you what the sewing looks like in reality. You are making loops, and we are going to loop down in the direction that we're sewing. That's it. That is this entire sewing. We'll do a little something different at the end of our pages, but this entire sewing is loops. If you can remember that, it will make things so much easier for you. Take your first signature and your cover and make sure the arrows are pointing in the same direction. Then grab your thread and take your needle and go through that first hole. Pull the thread all the way through so that the knot ends up in the valley. If it's too long, you can just snip it off. But don't go so close to the knot that you cannot retie the knot if needed. The first thing we're doing is we're taking our thread and we're going around the outside of the cover, looping it and going back through the hole. Your thread will come out between the signature and the cover and on one side of the original thread. And it doesn't matter which side it comes out on. Pull the thread all the way through. Our next step is to loop the thread that is coming out of the signature. You're just looping that one thread. You're not looping the threads that wrap around the cover. Go ahead and take your needle and hook the thread that is coming out of the signature. It should not be catching the threads on the covers. Then pull the thread all the way through. This will be easiest done if you place your signature and cover on the table and pull it. Once you pull it, you're going to take it and you're going to go wiggle, 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 and it's going to make a little knot. It will feel a little loose because there's nothing else attached, but that's what it should look like. Our next step is to go back through the hole. If you're having a hard time avoiding the knot on the inside of the signature, take your needle and poke through the hole and use it to help push the knot aside. You also can snip your thread out of the way if you need to. Leave a little bit excess just in case you need to retie your knot. And pull your thread all the way through. Don't worry if it's not exactly as tight as you like. Let's go ahead and sew the rest of the cover on, then we can come back to this and fix it. It will be a lot easier with the rest of the cover attached. Now take your needle and go through the second hole and pull the thread all the way through. You'll notice that the thread is beginning to run down the middle of the valley of the signature. It can be challenging to wrap the thread around the cover through the hole and not poke into the signature. What I like to do is hold the cover and signature with one hand. You may also find that it's easier for you to do this on the table. Either way works great. But in the end, when you've wrapped that thread around, it should look like this. And pull the thread all the way through. If you're using flat thread like what I am, sometimes they get twisted, and this is when you go ahead and fix it before you move on. Take your needle and drop it down between the first signature and the cover. It will end up on one side or the other of the first thread. For this one, I'm placing it on the side that's going in the direction that I'm sewing, but it really doesn't matter. That's what it should look like. Next, you're going to take your needle and hook the thread that is coming out of your signature. Just that thread. We're making a loop. You can see it's not catching the threads on the cover, just the thread that's coming out of that first signature. And pull the thread all the way through. Then we're going to make our little knot. And you're going to go wiggle, 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 wiggle. Now go back into the hole in your signature, the same one that you just came out of, and try to avoid the thread on the inside of the signature. Pull your thread all the way through. Next, move on to the third hole. Go out from the inside of the signature to the outside. Pull the thread. It's really starting to run down the valley. The book will become easier to hold as more of the cover is attached. Loop around the cover from the outside in. Pull your thread all the way through. Take the thread and place it between the cover and the signature. Pull the thread all the way through. Just beware, if you have anything on your desk while you're sewing, your thread will find it and grab it. Then link the thread that is coming out of the signature, just that thread. Pull the needle all the way through. Tighten it up and go wiggle, 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 and then go back through the hole in the signature. Repeat the same step for the rest of the holes on your cover until you get to the last hole. It's a little bit different because we'll be adding on the next signature. Remember, you're going out the hole, pull the thread all the way through, wrap the cover, go back through the hole of the cover, pull the thread all the way through, take the thread and place it between the cover and the signature, pull the thread all the way through. That's what it should look like. And then wrap the thread that is coming out of the signature. Pull the thread all the way, and then tighten it up. Then go back in the hole in the signature. When you get to the last hole of your signature, you're going to go out just like you had before. Wrap the cover, go through the hole of the cover, pull your thread all the way through, fix it if you need to, then drop your needle between the first signature and the cover, just like you have every previous step. Pull your thread, then wrap the thread that is coming out of the signature, just like you have every other time. Pull your thread, and then tighten it up. Don't go back into the hole of the signature. Before we move on, let's go back to the very beginning of our sewing and fix any looseness. You can take the thread where the knot is and tug it just a little bit, and if it tightens it up, reknot it, and that should help tighten up your book. We're ready to move on to our second signature. Pick up your second signature and double check that the arrow is going the same direction as the arrow of the first signature in the cover. Take your needle and go through that first hole. Pull the needle all the way through. The signature should line up. And pull your thread all the way through. It's time to start the loops. Remember that we're looping in the direction that we're sewing. You'll see some tutorials that do more of a U-shape, and this is okay too. Either way, you're making links that connect the signatures together. For this first loop, you will be looping between the first signature and the cover. You'll just be catching the threads that connect the signature and the cover, not the actual thread looping around the cover. That's what it should look like on the outside. And we're going to go through that second hole, the one that you just came out of. Take your needle, poke it through, and pull the thread all the way. And there you go. You have made your first loop. It almost looks like a teardrop. You'll know you pulled it too tight if you don't have that teardrop shape. Next, go out the third hole. Everything is exactly the same until you get to the very end of the signature. Pull the thread all the way through. Then link the thread that connects the cover and the first signature. Your needle will go between the cover and the first signature. Remember, we're not catching the threads on the actual cover. We're making our loop. Pull the thread all the way. Take your needle and go through that same hole you just came out of. Pull the thread all the way, and then go out the next hole. Same steps until you get to the very end of the signature. So go out the hole, pull the thread all the way through, link between the cover and the first signature. You can always open up between the cover and the signature and check it just to make sure you're not catching the threads on the cover. Pull your thread all the way, then go back in the same hole that you just came out of. Repeat the same step for each remaining hole. When it comes to the last hole of the signature, you're going to start off the same way. You'll go out the hole, pull your needle all the way through. This time, because we're about to change directions, I'm going to place the thread on the opposite side, the left-hand side, and link in that direction. You'll pull the thread until you get a little loop. We are going to create a kettle stitch, which will lock the signatures together. There's my loop. I'm going to pull it smaller so you can really see it. It'll have a top thread and a bottom thread. You'll take your needle and you're going to go up between the two threads. So go up between the two threads. This will be easier if you place the book on your table. It will make a shape that almost looks like a pretzel. Pull the thread all the way and then tighten it up. If this is too challenging and you get frustrated, just do a normal loop. It is totally fine and it will work. Once you have completed the kettle stitch, it is really fantastic that you can accidentally bump the book, drop the book. It doesn't matter what will happen because that kettle stitch has locked in your signatures. They won't budge and your book will stay nice and tight. Take your third signature, double check that the arrow is running in the same direction, then place it on the top of your book. Take your needle and go through that first hole and pull your thread all the way. Go out the second hole, pull your thread, then take your needle and loop the thread that connects the first and second signatures. You can keep the book closed. This time there is no thread to worry about catching, no cover to get in the way. You can keep the book completely closed while you do this. Be careful as you poke the needle in not to tear your paper. That's what it looks like on the inside, and pull the thread all the way through. It's making the first part of the teardrop shape. Take your needle and go back through the same hole that you just came out of. Pull your thread all the way through. There you go. There's your teardrop shape. You can really see the difference between what a kettle stitch looks like and your loops. Go out the next hole and you'll repeat these same steps until you get to the very last hole of the signature. Pull the thread all the way. Then we'll loop the thread that connects the first and second signature. Take your needle and place it between the first and second signature and loop that thread. Pull the thread all the way through. First part of the teardrop. Go back in the hole you just came out of. Pull your thread all the way. Then go out the next hole. Remember, you can place the book on the table. It's probably easier to sew this way. I'm holding it in my hand to help the camera see it. Everything's the same. You're still looping between that first and second signature and pulling the thread all the way. Then going back into the hole that you just came out of. On the very last hole, remember, it all starts the same. It just changes because we'll end up doing a kettle stitch. When we add that next signature, we'll be sewing in the other direction. I'm going to place my needle on the opposite side between the first and the second signature to loop the thread. Pull the thread until you get a loop. Take your needle and go up through the loop. Pull the needle all the way through and tighten it up. Take your fourth signature and place it atop your book. Take your needle and go through the first hole of the signature, pull it all the way to the inside, then go out the next hole. This time we'll be looping between the second and the third signature, catching the thread that connects the two. Remember, we're looping in the direction that we're sewing. So take your needle, place it between the second and the third signatures, catch the thread that connects them, and pull the thread all the way. Pull it all the way to the inside and repeat these same steps for the rest of the holes on the signature until you get to the very last one. Remember, when you're adding each signature, you're always looping the threads one signature below. So on this signature, we're linking between the second and third. As we add the next signature, it'll be between the third and the fourth, and then so on. It's these loops that create the look of the teardrops on the spine. Repeat this same series of steps for each hole until you get to the very last hole of the signature. When you get to the last hole, remember the steps are mostly the same. You'll still go out that last hole, pull the thread all the way, then you'll loop in the direction that you'll sew the next signature. On this signature, that means I'll be placing my needle to the left side between the second and third signature and looping that thread. As I pull the thread, I'll leave a tiny loop, then take my needle and go up through the loop to create the kettle stitch. And pull it snug. This time I'll be sewing it directly on the table. I have my signature, take the needle and go through that first hole, pull the thread all the way through, then go out the second hole, pull the thread, loop the thread that connects the third and the fourth signatures, then go back in the same hole you just came out of. Go to the next hole, pull your thread all the way, then loop the thread that connects the third and the fourth signature. Remember, don't squeeze your book so tight that you stab your signature pages. Just enough to keep it nice and tight together so you can get around the threads. Pull your thread and go back in the same hole you just came out of. Same step repeats each additional hole in the signature until you get to the very last one. You're still looping down one signature. Go back in the hole, pull the thread all the way through. When you get to the last hole, the same step applies. You're still going out the hole. And then from the opposite direction, loop the thread that connects the third and the fourth signature. It is very easy to go right through the loop as soon as you take the needle around those threads. And that's exactly what I did here. If you need to slow down so you can really see it well, do that. There's the kettle stitch. Now that you're ready for the last signature, let's talk about the back cover. Traditionally, the back cover and the last signature are sewn together. This can be very frustrating as the signature flops around while you're attaching the cover. I show you today how I add the signature first and then the cover, and it minimizes the stress of adding that back cover. Go through the first hole on your signature, pull the thread all the way, then go out the second hole, loop one signature down the same way you've done every other previous signature. Makes it exactly the same. You don't have to think about it or stress about it. We're going to go ahead and attach this signature like you did the rest to keep it nice and snug while we add the back cover. Go ahead and attach the rest of your signature by going out the holes, looping one signature below, back into the hole, pulling the thread all the way through, then going out the next hole until you get to the last hole of the signature. On the last hole, the steps are exactly the same with the kettle stitch, just like you've done in previous signatures. You'll go out the hole, pull the thread all the way, then because we're going to be sewing the cover on in the opposite direction, we'll place a thread, a signature below, and we'll loop those threads, pulling the thread till we get a little loop, then creating a kettle stitch by going up through the loop and snugging it up. Look how snug these signatures are, and I can flip it around and not worry about it. So all focus can be placed on adding that last cover without the last signature getting in the way. The only difference is that on the inside of that last signature, there'll be two threads running down the valley. But most people will not even notice. This is just like you sewed the first cover. You're taking that needle and going through the first hole of your cover, wrapping to the inside of your cover, and pulling the thread between the cover and the last signature. It does not matter what side of the attaching thread that the thread comes out on. Mine is on the right hand side. I just like doing it that way, but you can place it on the other side. It does not matter. That's what it should look like. The next step is just like we added the first cover. We're going to take our needle and catch the thread that comes out of the signature and loop that thread while avoiding the thread that wraps the cover. Then I'm going to snug it up. It will be a little tricky to avoid the threads on the inside. Take your needle, you can move the threads over. This is just like you sewed the front cover. Go through the hole, pull your thread all the way through, and then go out the next hole of the signature. Next, go through the second hole of the cover. Remember, you're wrapping from the outside in. Pull the needle and the thread to the inside of the cover. Take the needle and go between the cover and the last signature and pull the thread. This creates the loop on the cover. Loop the thread that comes out of the signature, trying to avoid the thread that wraps the cover. Pull the thread all the way, makes the little knot, snug it up, go back in that second hole of the signature, the one that you just came out of, pull the thread all the way, if it's loose, you can pull on the inside threads just to tighten it up and then keep on sewing. Remember, you're going from the outside of the cover to the inside, pulling the thread all the way through, then taking your needle and placing it between the cover and the last signature, pulling the thread. If the thread gets twisty, you can take a moment just to fix it. Then loop the thread that is coming out of the signature, trying to avoid the thread that wraps the cover. Pull the thread all the way, tighten it up, and go back into the hole of the signature. Move on to the next hole. Go out the hole, pull the thread all the way through. Take your needle, go through the hole of the cover from the outside to the end, pull the thread all the way. Then drop the thread between the cover and the last signature. Pull the thread through. Then loop the thread that is coming out of the signature while avoiding the thread that wraps the cover. You may have to slow down and move threads out of the way. Pull the thread, tighten it up, then go back in the hole of the signature. Pull the thread through. On the last hole, the steps are exactly the same. You'll go out the hole, go through the last hole of the cover from the outside to the inside, pull the thread all the way, go between the back cover and the last signature, pull the thread all the way through, wrap the thread that's coming out of the signature, pull the thread, and tighten it up, and then go back into the hole of the signature. It's time now to tie it off. Since we have double threads on the inside, I usually just tie a knot on just one of them, and I do it a couple times. Be careful when you're tying this knot that you don't pull too tight and rip your pages. If you decide to cut the thread completely off, when you go to cut it, don't cut up against the knot. You want to give yourself a few inches of space, just in case you have to go back and tighten anything up, which rarely happens, but it's just a nice safety precaution. If you want a thread to run as a bookmark through the entire book, an easy way to measure it is this. You take your thread and you wrap it around the top edge of your spine of your book, down to the opposite side of your book. And you can see how far do you want it to hang down. If you're going to do a lot of knots in it and stuff, you just have to decide do you need more thread or not. But this is how I measure it. And then I decide where I want it to end and I cut it off. And that should be enough length to go from the front of the book to the back. in between all the pages, however you want to do it. The same way that you prepared the pages and the covers for this book can be used on other types of bindings. If you'd like to keep on sewing, check out this video. Thank you for watching.